Welcome to the Organizational Transformation Kung Fu Podcast with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
Hello, and welcome to another fun-filled, informative episode of Organizational Transformation Kung Fu, or as we like to call it, OT Kung Fu. I'm Jen Long. I am here in Denver, Colorado, and I am on with my colleague, Sandi Verrecchia from Satori Consulting in the lovely Toronto, Canada. How are you, Sandi?
I am fabulous. Happy New Year, Jen.
Happy New Year to you. And it's the beginning of another season of fun-filled opportunities for you to get your Kung Fu on your organizational transformation going. What are you going to spend your time on this year? Where are you going to create your own discipline? Where are you going to create some good study, some applied actions to transform the organizations that you run and lead and coach? And hopefully we're going to be able to help you out. So today we are talking about strategy, because it's the beginning of the year and this is the best time to talk about strategy.
Yeah.
So Sandi and I decided we'd do a little bit of work on what is bad strategy, because we run across bad strategy a lot, and what is good strategy, and what are some of the hallmarks of how you do a good strategy and what that might be about. So I'm going to hand it over to Sandi, who's the expert between the two of us, who does a lot of strategic work. And she can kick us off with maybe some of the issues or some of the stuff that you're up against a lot with clients.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about this one because strategy is one of those words that I think is just thrown around a lot. Like we need a strategic plan. We need a strategic planning retreat. And often it becomes 2 days offsite with a little bit of wine, which is that, elixir of truth, as Patrick Lencioni likes to say. And you come out with a document that's great. But we always talk, when we're talking with our clients, about how a poor strategy, well executed, is always going to be better than a brilliant strategy not executed or never executed. And so those 2 day offsites, right, that have a beautiful document that sits in a drawer is not what you need. So first and foremost, good strategy is strategy that is looked at on a daily basis, dog-eared, coffee-stained, driven out through the organization. So there's clear line of sight from everybody in the organization of what they can do to further the strategy.
So who has the strategy? So I'm getting ready. I'm going on a junket this upcoming week with a client, and we're doing the 2 day. They want to develop a playbook.
Yeah.
So is there, in your mind, a difference between, is the strategy and the playbook the same thing? Are we thinking of them as the same thing? And who needs a copy of this to dog ear it?
So yeah, I think you can use the same words, both, interchangeably, as long as they have all the elements. And who needs to have a copy? I would say everybody needs to have a copy, at least access to a copy. So all of your senior executive, absolutely. Every decision that they make needs to tie to strategy. So they should be looking at this thing daily. As you go down through the organization, they don't need to see it daily, but they need to know that it's active and it's out there. And so that when they're having conversations, it's tied into those conversations. So we're doing X, Y, and Z. We're launching a coaching program because it ties into one of our strategic priorities within our plan to, level up our people, that sort of thing. That sort of organizations that I think that are humming along, they talk strategy. They talk their strategy all the time. They don't talk strategy like the overarching strategy, but they talk about their strategy all the time.
Not philosophy. It's the focus of what they're doing, right?
How do they hit the ground running? Yeah. One of the things, strategy is about making choices, and it's as important about the choices that you're making as the choices that you're going to choose not to do. And almost even more importantly, to be really, really clear on, we want to get here and we're deliberately not going to do this particular thing to get there. We're going to go down this other road.
Right. It to me, it feels like the reason to do strategy is the thing is it forces you to focus. It's
Yeah.
the guardrails of don't wander off the path because this is
Yeah.
where we're heading kind of thing. And I think strategy sometimes feels overwhelming or big pie in the sky or not my job. That's some other deep thinker who's got to understand that thing. And I think that that's not true, right? It's
Mm-mm.
really much more practical. It's really much more of a day-to-day kind of tool. And here at Own Up, we incorporate it into the management thinking, right? Is if you're going to set clear expectations, how does it tie to the strategy? How does what you're asking your people to do,
Yeah.
right, bolster the strategic direction of the organization?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about before that, it was absolutely that tie into your accountability, right? Clear expectations in strategy is what is going to make your strategy work, right? So it's not good enough just to bring it down to the organization, but again, that clear line of sight, clear expectations, and then you can have those strong accountability conversations. So if a strategy or a strategic plan is to go off the rails, you should be able to tie it back to where it went off the rails. Is it a particular manager, a particular C-suite person who's not staying in their lane as a result, right? And as a result, not having those clear conversations with their staff, and it's just at its core, it's very simple, as you say. It doesn't have to be this crazy, really difficult, deep thinking thing. And I think so many of the books that have been written now have made it almost difficult, right?
Right. It seems really hard. And you and I were kind of, as we were prepping to have a conversation, we were laughing about how many books on strategy there are and how many kinds of approaches to strategy seem to be out there. I mean, there's the blue ocean strategy, and then there's what's his name from Harvard, Porter, his strategy, right? There's this,
Yeah.
there's the
Claim to
five
win is a
forces.
big one. And I'm as bad as the rest. I've got a billion books on my bookshelf that I
Right?
like to go through because I'm a bit of a book nerd. But and they all say something different, yet they all say something very similar. And so taking all of that good stuff and bringing it to an organization is important. And one of the things that many organizations come to me and they presuppose what they need. We want to do strategy, but we want a balanced scorecard. We want to do strategy. We want a strategy map as a result. And I think it's good to start with the end in mind many times, but
Yes.
it's around strategy. It's not always about the tool or the outcome of the tool that you're going to get versus the fun and messy bits in between that help you get to where you need to go, which may or may not be a balanced scorecard.
Well, exactly. And to be fair, from a coaching perspective, when we go in, the reason we are aware that there's so many books and why that's happening is, it's sometimes just dependent upon the personality of the leader, right?
Mm.
This resonates with them. This version of strategy resonates with the organizational leader. And so that's how you can end up with a company that's like, we're going to do a Lencioni playbook, for example, or we're going to do the five forces version, or we're going to do, right? There's some reason that it comes in the way it does. So what I'd say is don't sweat it.
Yeah.
What you really want to do is understand what it's about and don't worry about the format that it takes, knowing that it shouldn't, it's really just a page. It's a page of information.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I often say to my clients, I think I say to every single client, strategy is messy. And it's funny when we talk about personalities, some people are good with messy and other people are like, just get me out of this messy hell because I just want something concrete. I can't take it any longer.
Just tell me what to do.
And yeah, and those people, you have to really help them get through a strategy session, knowing that, the promise is at the end of the day, you will have a fully baked strategy, but you have to embrace the messiness along the way because there's a lot that goes into strategy and a lot of different angles that we need to look at and toss around and make choices on before you can land kind of on your final strategy document.
So when you prep people to get ready for their strategy day or their strategy offsite, what is key in the prep?
So talking to many, whether it's talking to them or having them fill out something, I do a lot of board work, so I'm board and management, and sometimes we engage with community stakeholders and things like that. But really, what I want from that initial engagement is, where do people feel they want to be at the end of the 3 to 5 years? Like, what is the commonalities across many that says we're successful if? So that's first and foremost. Alongside of that is, without dissecting it, is what are the other pieces? So what are we good at? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are the external opportunities, external threats that might be facing us? What's happening politically and economically and in the tech circles and things like that. Just from a sense of many views, many ideas and many heads sort of make light work. So if there's a lot of people clustering around one or two weaknesses or threats or economic issues, we can start narrowing down, once we know where we want to go, what it is that we want to tackle in terms of priorities.
Right. I think in the discussion, especially if you're doing this as a leadership team, which is generally the idea, is more brains are better than one. Mm-hmm. Get the different perspectives on the table, because they're all seeing your organization from a different way, right? Based on the work that they're doing, and being able to surface in the context of these conversations, not just where I see based on the market, what I see based on how we're performing well, what we're strong at, what our core is, but also here's where I get jammed up. Here's what I see as one of the biggest issues, right? So that you start to really kind of understand the barriers, the challenges, the puzzle starts to take shape. And I feel like that's the conversation that takes the long time, because you've got to really hear and be willing to explore a little bit everybody's perspective of how they're seeing it and what they're excited about and what they're concerned about.
Yeah, and biases, right? When you're thinking about management teams, they live it, they breathe it every day. But there's biases depending on where they are in the organizations, the departments they lead, and it's just natural. And so as a strategy coach and a strategic planner with them, it's to help tease out where there's bias and where there might be, and have them look at it differently. That's why I love when we bring boards and management teams together, because the board isn't in the day-to-day, and they should be really looking over the bow of the boat and looking forward and looking bigger picture. Whereas we expect management to be in the trenches, and it's, where they meet is very important in terms of where they want to take the organization.
Right. So when we look at bad strategy, what are the things that show up typically that aren't really strategic, that aren't really what we would call good strategy? And we're going to give a shout out right now to Richard Rummelt, who owns the book Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and he's a good strategic thinker and has some key things to say about this. So when we say good strategy, bad strategy, we're not just talking about his stuff, but we're also talking about what we experience. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm looking at his book here. So a shout out.
Well, he's got I think it's his that has the 4 hallmarks of bad strategy, right? Which is fluff, failure to challenge, mistaking a goals for strategy, and bad strategic objectives. And so let's talk fluff, right? Fluff is just a laundry list of things that you need to do. And that often is what people think a strategy is. If I need to do these 19 things this year, and then a strategy. And I always say, if you have to do that in service of what? And what is that action servicing? And is it aligned to a strategy? If it's not aligned to a strategy, either you need to revisit your strategy or you need to not do that. And that's why that conversation within organizations has to continue, because it's easy to get caught up in that shiny new object, right? Oh, this is happening. We just need to go over here, and whoop, you're out of your lane. You're dog paddling offside, and we need to bring them back. And so it's important that your strategy is just not a laundry list of things.
Well, and it's not it's not just what does he call it? A dog's dinner. It's
Mhm.
all this stuff, right? That or languaging instead of content or context, right?
Yes. Oh,
That we're going to
yes.
be the infinite company, or we're going to be the, what does that mean, and how is
Mhm.
that setting you up?
Yeah. Yeah. I've had many organizations that have labored and labored and labored over the final document. More labor goes into the final document than goes into actually creating the document. So those conversations that we've had, clarity and things like that. But it's sure as, it's pretty. It's a pretty thing. And, strategy isn't necessarily pretty.
It
Um,
isn't. It isn't. And that's why they're trying, so the goals thing is the natural pitfall, right? That's
mhm.
where everybody goes,
Yeah.
especially engineers. I work with a lot of engineers, and could we just set this out and make it clear? And they always default to goal setting and action items way before they've got clarity on what the big picture is.
Yeah, yeah. So good strategy, you know where you're going initially, and then you set those goals and priorities and actions after. Bad strategy, you don't. Fluff, so just a whole beautiful document of nothing. His other point is failure to face the challenge. So if you don't define the challenge that you need to overcome, you can't get there. So again, clarity on where you want to go and the things that are in your way. What are those big rocks that you need to move out of the way in order to be hit your strategic direction, right?
How is
And
it, do you think, Sandy? So when he talks about that whole thing, that's a lack of an ability to face the problem.
mhm.
Examples of that? Um, I
I think
had
it's
I
a
had one group, right, that was getting really ready to go and are part of a larger structure. And really it came down to having to first deal with how they were engaging with the larger structure,
mm,
right? To be able to say, until we own that we're part of this, we can't create strategy, because all we're doing is complaining about how they're dealing with us.
right.
Right. So I think that was, for me, a most recent example of a client who was like, we want to do strategy. We want to do, here's where we want to be, but couldn't see where they needed to be until they dealt with the fact that they were part of something else first.
Right, right. Well, I think that's why that pre-work and getting many minds of kind of what's working and what's not idea and find
Mhm.
those commonalities because once many people or several people say, I think inflation is an issue. It's like, well, how do we influence inflation? How do we change? We can't change inflation. It's just what it is. But if it's impacting our strategy in order for us to get to where we want to go, what do we need to do internally to impact? So it lessens the impact on us. And so I think that's one way. It's identifying those big hurdles, and then what we need to do differently in order to get around these hurdles or jump over these hurdles or avoid the hurdle completely. So I think that's really it comes down to conversation and having many people being honest about where we're at.
Now, do you do any prep work relative to getting insights from external sources, customer relationships? What do the customers look at you and say, well, I don't know why you guys don't do this, or I don't understand why you guys don't do that? And is there an effort, and does that add value from a strategic perspective?
It absolutely does, and if nothing else, it either confirms or denies sort of where management's head is at, and I think that's an important piece of this, especially if you're working with boards. Everybody sort of has their own idea of where an organization is at. We find the most value. Well, it comes from talking to everybody, but a great deal of value comes from talking to external vendors and partners as to what is doing well, and just to get their sense of where they think the organization should go. If there's a disconnect, then that's a great conversation. Like, our customers think that we're not doing this well, yet everybody over here said in our SWOT that that's our strength.
Yeah.
So which is it, right?
Yeah.
And so those crunchy conversations that you can start to have and start peeling back and saying, your customers really want to see you over here, yet you're talking about going over here. And so do you want to bring these customers with you, or do you want new customers? And so what is that conversation? So it's really those healthy conversations that come out of putting everything on the table. And the beauty of having an external facilitator like yourself or myself or so many others is that we can call that, right? We don't
Yeah.
have we don't own it. We can just call it the way it is, see where
Yeah.
it lands, and then help them navigate these, as I like to call them, crunchy conversations for the betterment of the organization and the strategy overall.
Yeah. Because the outside facilitator is really good at helping your team listen to themselves, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Get into those moments of, as we wander down the goal setting, or let's put a pin in that, or, is that valuable or not valuable?
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've talked about the bad strategy, right? So the fluff, the failure to face the problem, bad strategic objectives. Are we missing anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that is not in this at that 4. I think what I would say is sort of that groupthink strategy. And so having conversations where there's a very loud voice in the room and everybody goes, oh, yes, we need to do that. And yet, and not having the conversation around, is it the right thing to do? I think poor strategy can be very much driven out of poor conversations.
Right. Not addressing that there is bias or that there is weight. The leader really wants something and everybody's like, okay, but they're not willing to have the conflict of ideas, not willing to throw other things out there or say, question the thinking behind the reasoning, right? To really get people, because sometimes when you get your advocates to speak out loud at a deeper level of, well, why this, well, why that, well, tell us more about that. They start to understand, oh, this is just a pipe dream of mine because it serves my AOR, because it, they start to really understand what their motivations are around it and how that is or isn't going to help the team and the company writ large.
Yeah. And that's why I love the question, in service of what? And I ask that all the time, probably ad nauseum, because it's really super easy to get tactical quick. And my job as a facilitator is to keep them at a higher level, keep them around the strategy. And so using that in service of what, so it's a senior executive that's throwing out and sort of coloring the conversation, in service of what, doing this will do what for us, and really sort of holding their feet to the fire and dissecting it a little bit to make sure it is the right thing to do, which then opens up room for others.
Yes.
I would hope.
Well, yeah. And that's part of the facilitation, is when you've got the quiet people in the room, the ones who lay back, the ones who are just kind of waiting for the day to end. What are we going to do?
Yes.
Right.
And sleeping in the back.
Yeah. Bringing them in because they've got questions. They're having a conversation. There's definitely a monologue going on in their own mind. And sometimes surfacing those things, people are surprised at, thank you for asking that.
Yes.
It changes somebody else's thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's an article by McKinsey, The Perils of Bad Strategy, and it was written around 2010, 2011. And one of the lines in there says, a good strategy does more than urge us forward toward a goal or a vision. It honestly acknowledges the challenges we face and provides an approach to overcoming them. And that's really, for me, kind of the bottom line. Like, what are those big rocks in your way? And how do we need to move them or go around them, go over them, go under them, whatever it might be.
Yes. So let's talk about what good strategy is. And so good strategy. So if you can start to identify it, start to do the work to try and really get there. So when you talk about the challenge, right, it starts with identifying the challenge, but it's also that longer vision, right?
It really is the longer vision to begin with. Challenges are the things that are in the way of getting to the longer vision. So it's like, where do we want to go? Let's put a pin in the map that says, if we're successful 3 to 5 years from now, this is what it looks like. But language around it, get clarity on it, get agreement on it, and then you start talking about what are those challenges to get there.
Right. How does it present itself? And that's where your diagnosis wants to start to focus, right? And so your good strategy is diagnostic.
Yes. Yes.
It's asking all the questions. It's clearly bounding your problems. It's really making your challenges crystal, right? That kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Yes.
What's another hallmark of a good strategy?
So, well, once you've identified what those challenges are, making decisions around, do you want to tackle them or not? If you don't tackle them, if you do tackle it, will it take you closer to or further away from that pin in the map that you've already set? And starting making decisions around where do you want to focus your energy? Where will you get the most bang for your buck? So that sort of that highly strategic, low effort sort of idea is like, where do you want to tackle first?
Okay, so it's really looking at your pin, going, here's the direction. So what kind of actions do we want to take relative to this direction? What kind of action do we need to stop because it takes us away?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, and put a goal around that, right?
Yeah.
So what is that? What is that goal? So once you determine that you want to move this particular this thing is in the way, and so a good example is talent right now, right? The war for talent is hard to get people, it's hard to keep people. If you want to double your size as an organization in the next 3 years, probably there's got to be something strategic around people and your culture and your value proposition around attraction and things like that. And so understanding where you are today and understanding where you want to be tomorrow and what that gap is will help you to start forming some priorities and tactics around that. So kind of naming those pieces become important.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And I think the one of the pieces is, how real is it, right?
Mm.
Are these goals achievable, doable, realistic, time frame wise, right? Because if you're dog-earing your strategy, there's got to be some kind of sense of, are we progressing here, or what does this feel like? And so when you talk about setting the realistic, right, we talk about SMART goals, we talk about this, we talk about all that kind of stuff. How and maybe that's the easy part of strategy, right, of breaking it down into the bite size. And is it realistic?
Well, I think it is the easy, but I think it's also the hard part, because often we'll do our strategy and then we'll go into our tactical planning session and say, okay, well, what do we need to do to hit this goal that's going to further our strategy? And then the list, we'll whiteboard them all down. And so when do you want to do them? Well, we can do that by Q1 of 2023, and we'll do that by Q1 of 2023. We'll do that by Q2 of 2023. And now you have a list of 15 things that are all being done in 2023 on one goal. And so it's that, the desire to, like, we can do it everything, but you can't boil the ocean. And so being selective on when you're going to be doing things, knowing that a strategy is a longer term play. And so what are you going to do in 24? And what are you going to do in 25? So start, taking that enthusiasm, tempering it, and bringing some reality into, what needs to happen first in order to move everything else along. And that's not it's not always an easy thing to do.
I think that, yeah, I mean, it's because when you start these strategic conversations, you're thinking so broadly, and you're thinking big, and you're thinking bold, and you get excited. And then when you start to kind of get into the technical end of it, like, this is how we're going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
That really is when you can start to lose focus.
Right. Yeah. So that's the sexy part, right? Oh, we can do this, and we can do that. And so again, I always go back to, so we're doing this in service of what? Does it still marry into our strategic goal and to our strategy? And does it need to be done now, or can be done 2 years from now?
Yeah.
And then again, who's going to do it and who's going to own it, and who's accountable for it, and all those different pieces need to be tussled out and clear, so that it's not just a strategy that is owned by a C-suite person because they had their last edit round on it or something like that.
And it's this fluffy sentence of nothing that means nothing to anyone, and everyone just does what they've done for the last 2 years, 5 years.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the danger of not keeping it simple and making it practical and coherent, right? Like clear, actionable stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Does in your experience, right? So we've really only talked about strategy, but I also think that strategy, offsite strategy conversations, companies bring in mission, companies bring in values, companies bring in these additive elements. Talk a little bit about how to, how to manage
Yeah,
that.
they're
Good
loaded.
thing, bad thing. What's your
Yeah.
experience?
So I think mission, vision, values have a place. I think mission, vision, values often derail strategy because the strategy becomes all about, is their mission right? Should it be a the there or a there, or it becomes a session of wordsmithing something that's already there. So I always say, well, look at mission, vision, and maybe values, but mission, vision for sure at the end. And
Yeah.
so here's our strategy for the next 3-5 years. And does it take us further from or closer to our vision? And if it's further away, then we need to revisit our vision. If it's closer to, then all the power. And if you want to revisit it, then you have a session that is strictly just for that purpose, a mission, vision, values day, or 2 days or 3 days, because they're lofty things to redo. But they more times than not, I think when you start with them, they derail.
They do, because it is a lot of languaging things that I think typically people have come up with. And I'm a big fan of practical. I'm a big fan of usable. I'm a big fan of don't overblow this. If your strategy is more than one page, no one's going to pay attention. You don't even know what's on it. It's going to be too much information, right? I came across this other source around this, which I thought was interesting because it's kind of a combination of mission and strategy. And it's a guy named Don Miller who does a whole series called Business
Storytelling.
Yeah, he's the story brand guy, right? The story brand guy.
Love him.
So he's all about how are you putting your story brand is all about the hero and who's the hero. The customer is your hero, and you're not the hero, and giving you good marketing advice. And that's how I've got to learn about Don Miller. But now he's gone into business development in terms of how do you create strategy, how do you set up your business to make money, and so he did this whole series on business on a mission, and he has concocted a very tight crossbreed between understanding. He's basically like, your mission right now is just a bunch of words to start away. It doesn't mean it's meaningless. No one cares. And so he's like, you've got to reframe your mission so that your employees can see themselves as part of the story, because he still uses that story framework for all his work. Anyway, his crossover between the mission and the strategy was around being very specific about putting economic objectives into your mission. And it was about putting a deadline into your mission. And then it was about a clear understanding of the why and putting that all together in one cohesive thought so that you could relate the actions, right? So if you have the economic objectives, the corresponding actions around the objectives became very, very clear, and that the alignment gets a lot easier. And so I'll throw that into the mix, which I thought was, and that might
it's really
be
interesting
good for a small business, but maybe not so great for the larger, more complex.
Well, I think it's for me, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but it confuses mission and vision. Right. So mission has always sort of been like, why do you exist? So what is your why? Or your purpose, right? That is your mission. So to put economic measurements in that, it gets a little.
And to be clear, and here's how because I'm not Don, this is an internal mission, not an external mission. This isn't the mission of your business. This is the strategic mission of your business.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to read it.
I thought that was an interesting way to kind of frame it organizationally. And
so really, what you're saying is this internal mission is what I would call your strategic direction.
Yes.
Right. It's like, where do you what is that? Where do you want to be in 3 years? Is our mission to get there? versus our external mission of like, we show up every day to be good corporate citizens and, la, 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 la.
Right.
So yeah, okay.
Yeah, why our business exists and who we serve and how we make the world a better place kind of mission. It's more of here's the mission we're on for 2023 internally, and to be able to take those challenges and turn those into economic objectives, which I thought was
so I agree with this. I think the term mission is makes it muddy.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah, in that regard. So I like it. I have to think about it a bit more, but I think maybe
I liked about it was the story, because it goes with his brand, right? So if you're going to tell the story, what is the story, and how do you put yourself in the story, and how do you get on the mission internally? And so that I thought, I'm just giving a shout out to a simplified crossover version if you want to explore it. It's relatively new, and I think his book just came out, and so.
And if you haven't read any of his stuff, it's fantastic and easy to read. So, any of his books, you can pick them up. And
any of his books.
I
was going to see if I had one. Oh, yeah, here's one. And this
Story Brand?
This is his Business Made Simple.
Oh, okay, good.
And so this is he's got a online kind of university that he does. There he is. And anyway, I thought it was an interesting, dealing with strategy and stuff all the time. I'm always looking for what is an opportunity to, create clarity for an organization on how they do this.
No, I like it. I just wonder about the word mission in that context, because everybody knows the word mission in a different context. And so,
yes.
But I love the crossover, and I think it's great. I'm going to buy that book. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And one of my vision board things is to read at least 12 business books this year. So not just buy them.
What's number one on your list?
Not sure yet. I've got a bunch here that are beckoning me, but yeah.
Yeah. So if you're going to read strategy books, he's the guy. Rummelt's the guy. That Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, sort of how we've been framing up the conversation, though there are several others. I don't know, Sandy, do you have a favorite strategy book?
I love Roger Martin, and I love Playing to Win. There's also McKinsey has a book out called Around the Hockey Stick. I can't remember exactly what the book is. A strategy beyond the hockey stick, I think, which is really good as well. There's some good stuff out there.
All right.
So, all this to say is, like, don't start with the end. Don't start with your end in mind, and don't start with that you need to have a balanced scorecard. Develop a process that's going to work for your organization. The outcome is got to be a sort of a one-page document that is usable, digestible, understood throughout the organization.
Yes, accessible, understandable, clear.
Yeah, dog-eared 100%. And coffee-stained.
All right. So hopefully that was some helpful information on how you're approaching your strategy, some telltales of good stuff, some telltales of not such good stuff, some resources for you to use. And I guess that does it for us on strategy.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. We'll talk soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening, and please visit Sandy's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca, and Jen's website at managementpossible.com. Thanks again.